What if everything you've been taught about love, worth, and happiness is a lie? What if the reason your life feels stuck, exhausting, or painfully repetitive isn't because you're broken, but because you've spent your entire life abandoning yourself? Carl Jung warned us, the most dangerous thing we can do is to live someone else's life, to mold ourselves into what the world expects, to seek approval from people who never truly saw us, and to call that normal. But how often do we stop to ask ourselves, what do I need? What do I want? Who am I when no one else is looking? For most people, the answer is silence, and in that silence grows the shadow, a hidden force made of everything we've denied, suppressed, or sacrificed just to be accepted. The more we ignore it, the louder it screams. It shows up in toxic relationships we can't seem to escape, in the anxiety that haunts our quietest moments, in the fear that deep down, maybe we'll never be enough. But what if healing isn't found in fixing yourself? What if it begins the moment you choose yourself? Jung believed that true transformation starts with individuation, the radical act of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be. And make no mistake, this isn't a gentle process. It requires courage. It demands truth. It begins with one decision: to stop abandoning yourself. In this journey, we will go deep into the psyche, into the pain, into the parts of you you've kept hidden from the world, and maybe even from yourself. Because when you finally prioritize your soul over your survival mask, healing doesn't just become possible, it becomes inevitable. Stay with me. Let's begin. The illusion of selflessness and the cost of forgetting yourself. You were never meant to live your life in pieces, and yet somewhere along the way, you learned to cut parts of yourself off. To silence your needs, to dim your voice, to make space for everyone else except you. From a young age, many of us are taught that good people put others first, that love means self-sacrifice, that saying no is selfish, that our worth is measured by how useful, agreeable, and accommodating we can be, and so we give and give and give until there's nothing left. At first it feels noble. They call you strong. They say you're dependable, empathetic, easy to love, but the truth is you're disappearing. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become anything when you're constantly shrinking to fit into someone else's expectations? You smile when you're hurt. You say you're fine when you're crumbling. You carry the emotional weight of people who would never lift a finger for you. And over time, you forget what joy even feels like. You lose track of your desires. You become a ghost in your own life. This is the illusion of selflessness. It's not kindness. It's not virtue. It's abandonment, sugar-coated and socially accepted. The cost: your identity, your energy, your peace. You start waking up tired, not because of lack of sleep, but because every day feels like you're performing. You feel alone, even in the presence of others, because no one really sees you. They see the version of you that serves them. And slowly the resentment grows. But here's the truth Jung knew: what we repress doesn't disappear. It metastasizes. Every unspoken no, every moment you neglected your own boundaries, builds a storm inside you. It might show up as depression, as chronic fatigue, as explosive anger that seems to come from nowhere, as relationships where you give everything and still feel empty, because you are trying to pour from a cup that has long since dried out. But what if I told you this? You don't owe anyone the version of you that cost your peace. Being whole is not selfish. Being honest is not rude. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. It's the beginning of healing. And once you make that shift, once you stop living for applause and start living for alignment, you begin to return home to yourself. You begin to remember who you were before the world taught you to forget. You begin to feel alive. So here's your invitation. Next time someone asks something of you, ask yourself first: does this honor me? Because every time you choose yourself, you send a signal to your unconscious mind. I am safe. I am worthy. I matter. And when that belief finally takes root, the world you live in begins to shift, not because the world changed, but because you did. But what happens to everything you've denied? Your anger, your sadness, your needs, when you begin choosing yourself again? It doesn't vanish, it awakens. The shadow always speaks. What you deny will eventually surface. There's a part of you that you've spent your whole life trying to hide. You don't talk about it. You don't look at it. You pretend it doesn't exist, but it watches. It waits. And eventually, it speaks. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the collection of everything within us that we reject, suppress, or disown. Our anger, our jealousy, our cravings, our fear, even our power. We were told these things made us bad, so we pushed them into the basement of our psyche. But the shadow doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. In fact, the more you run from it, the more it runs you. Ever wonder why the same kind of relationship keeps hurting you again and again? Why you sabotage your own happiness the moment it arrives? Why you attract people who treat you like you don't matter? That's your shadow. It's not trying to punish you, it's trying to be seen. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In other words, you'll keep reliving the same emotional storylines, different faces, same pain, until you turn inward and ask, what part of me keeps choosing this? But most people don't, because meeting your shadow feels like dying. It means admitting that you're angry, that you're scared, that sometimes you feel unlovable. It means owning the moments you betrayed yourself for love, for safety, for approval. It means facing the truth that the person you thought you had to be was never really you. And that's terrifying. But it's also where freedom begins. Because here's the truth, you cannot fully heal what you are still pretending not to feel. You cannot reclaim your life until you reclaim the parts of you that have been exiled. The shadow shows up in whispers, in the envy you feel when someone else lives freely, in the guilt that keeps you saying yes when you want to scream no, in the panic you feel when someone sees through your mask. But if you dare to listen, you'll hear its message. There is something in you that still needs your love, not judgment, not punishment, not shame. Love. That's the paradox Jung understood better than anyone. The very thing you think will destroy you, the rage, the grief, the unmet need, is the key to your healing, not by acting it out, but by integrating it. To own your shadow is to become whole, to say, yes, this too is me. And when you do that, something miraculous happens. You stop reacting, you start responding, you stop projecting, you start reclaiming, you stop needing the world to change, because you've changed the relationship you have with yourself. And for the first time, you feel powerfully grounded, not in perfection, but in truth. But knowing your shadow is only the beginning. Because even when you see it clearly, a deeper question remains. Why did you allow the pain to linger so long? Why did you stay in places that hurt you for years, even when you knew they were killing your spirit? What you tolerate, you teach, the hidden power of self-betrayal. It starts with something small. You say yes when you meant no. You stay quiet when your soul screamed to speak. You forgive what you never truly accepted. And then you tell yourself, it's not a big deal, I'm just keeping the peace. But over time, that peace becomes a prison, and the person you're at war with is yourself. Carl Jung warned that the psyche cannot be fooled. Every time you betray yourself, even subtly, your unconscious records it not just as pain, but as a message. This is what we deserve. And what we believe we deserve, we continue to allow. Think about that. The way someone treats you isn't just about them, it's a reflection of what your energy says is acceptable. Every boundary you don't set becomes an invitation. Every silence becomes permission. Every time you minimize your hurt, The world learns to do the same. You're not just tolerating mistreatment, you're teaching it. But here's the twist. Most of us don't do this consciously. We think we're being kind, or strong, or spiritually mature. We think we're choosing. Love by choosing others, even when it costs us ourselves. But that's not love. That's fear dressed in a mask of virtue. Fear of being alone, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as difficult, demanding, or too much. So instead, we abandon ourselves, we shapeshift, we endure. But Carl Jung knew, every act of self-abandonment fractures the soul, and fractured people don't just carry pain, they pass it on. They become parents who model self-sacrifice over self-respect, partners who confuse chaos with passion, friends who smile while secretly aching for someone to finally choose them. But no one will ever choose you fully until you do. And that choice doesn't happen with words. It happens in the silent decisions you make every day, to say no when your body tenses, to walk away when your spirit starts to shrink, to no longer beg for what you already deserve. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. People will question you. Some will leave. But ask yourself this: if someone only values you when you betray yourself, do they really value you? Healing requires integrity, and integrity means acting in alignment with your inner truth, especially when it costs you approval. This is the part most people avoid, because when you stop betraying yourself, your life starts to rearrange. Some relationships dissolve, some jobs no longer fit, some friendships fade, and it feels like loss, but it's actually liberation. You're not losing your life. You're losing the illusions you built to survive, and beneath them, something truer begins to emerge. Version of you who doesn't explain her no, who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who doesn't water herself down just to be liked. That version of you already exists. She's been buried beneath years of tolerating the intolerable. Now she wants out, but can you truly become her while staying in the same environments that broke her? You can't heal in the same place that hurt you. Healing is not a mindset, it's an environment. You can do the inner work. You can meditate, journal, go to therapy, read every book on self-worth. But if you're still surrounded by people and places that drain your spirit, your soul will remain in survival mode. Because here's the truth Jung understood. You cannot become whole in a space that only ever knew the broken version of you. You cannot evolve while staying loyal to environments that benefit from your wounds. And yet, this is what so many of us try to do. We cling to the familiar, to the relationship we've outgrown, to the job that pays well but costs our peace, to the family dynamics that require silence to keep the illusion intact. We tell ourselves, maybe, if I change, they'll change too. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I just need to be more patient. But deep down, you feel it in your chest when you walk into certain rooms, the way your shoulders tense, the way your breath shortens, the way your intuition whispers, this is not safe. And still, you stay, because leaving feels like betrayal, because walking away feels like failure, because you were taught that loyalty means enduring pain without complaint. But Carl Jung wrote, "Individuation is the process of becoming the person you are inherently meant to be. Not the person your partner wants, not the version your parents approve of, not the mask your community claps for. You raw, unfiltered, free." But here's the paradox. To become that person, you often have to let go of everything that made the old one. Feel secure. This is where many break, because the soul begins to whisper, leave. But the ego screams, but where will I go? Who will I be without this? And that fear keeps people stuck in relationships that wound them, in patterns that suffocate, in houses that feel more like cages than homes. But healing isn't possible without movement. Sometimes that movement is external, changing your environment. Sometimes it's internal, redefining what you'll no longer accept. Often it's both. Because you teach your nervous system safety not by enduring chaos, but By showing it peace, you reclaim your power not by staying and proving your worth, but by walking away when that worth is ignored. No, it won't be easy. People will call you selfish. They'll guilt you. They'll remind you of everything you owe them. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that had to suffer to make others comfortable. You don't owe your past the sacrifice of your future. The space you need to heal is not found in approval. It's found in alignment. That means protecting your peace, even when it disappoints others. That means releasing roles you were never meant to carry. That means understanding that not everyone is meant to go where you're going, and that's okay, because when you begin to detach from the environments that fed your wounds, you make space for something sacred, self-trust. You start to feel safe inside your own skin. You begin to breathe deeper. You remember what it feels like to exist without walking on eggshells. This is when healing truly begins. Not in the moment you decide to change, but in the moment you stop negotiating with what keeps you wounded. But stepping away from the noise doesn't mean silence is peaceful. Because when the distractions fall away, you'll be forced to face what's always been beneath the surface. The night the soul screams, embracing the dark night of the soul. There comes a moment in every journey when everything familiar dissolves. The people who once made you feel they no longer understand you. The identity you clung to begins to crack. The distractions stop working. The masks start falling, and all you're left with is silence. This is not depression. It's not a breakdown. It's something older, deeper, more sacred. Carl Jung called it the night sea journey. Others call it the dark night of the soul, a descent into the unknown where your ego dies, so your soul can be reborn. And make no mistake, it's terrifying, because in that darkness you no longer have anything to hide behind. You feel like you're falling into yourself endlessly with no ground in sight. The thoughts you've spent years avoiding rise like ghosts. Who am I if I'm not needed? What if I'm never truly loved? What if all of this has been a lie? There is no light here, no certainty, just questions and the ache of your own becoming. But here's what Jung understood. The dark night is not a punishment. It's an initiation. It's the sacred unraveling that strips you of everything false, everything performative, everything rooted in survival rather than truth. Because real transformation doesn't come with soft edges. It breaks you, not to destroy you, but to force you to see who you really are, when no one is watching and nothing is left to prove. This is the soul's classroom, and most people run from it. They distract, they numb, they go back to toxic relationships just to feel something. Again, they chase validation to avoid the vacuum of uncertainty, but those who dare to stay, to sit in the dark, to face the void, they come out different, quieter, clearer, stronger, because they've faced their pain without flinching. They've cried the ancient tears. They've let parts of themselves die, and in doing so, they made space for the authentic self to rise. The ego doesn't survive this night, but the soul? The soul begins to sing, not loudly, not at first, but gently in whispers that say, "I'm still here. You've always had everything you needed. Now let's rebuild." This night is sacred because it shows you the truth. You are not your job. You are not your trauma. You are not what they did to you. You are not your roles, your weight, your titles, or your past. You are the observer behind it all, the awareness that remains when everything else falls away. And once you touch that awareness, even for a moment, you never again fully forget who you are. But what happens when the soul begins to rise and the world around you doesn't approve? When you start becoming the version of yourself you've always longed for, and others begin to resent it, the price of being real. When you change, the world resists. There is a secret nobody tells you about healing. It's not the pain that's hardest to bear. It's the loneliness, the disorientation, the shock of watching everything around you shift the moment you begin to stand in your truth. You think healing will bring peace, and eventually it will, But first, it brings disruption, because the moment you start choosing yourself, you stop playing the roles others assign to you. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop pretending everything's fine just to keep the peace. And when that happens, people notice, but not in the way you might hope. Some will feel threatened by your clarity. Others will call you selfish, cold, distant. They'll say, "You've changed," as if it were an accusation, and they're right. You have changed. You no longer tolerate what drains you. You no longer seek validation from the people who only loved your performance. You've stopped negotiating with your own soul just to keep others comfortable. And that kind of shift, it's powerful, it's necessary, and it terrifies people who are still at war with themselves. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's the second half of that truth. The moment you do, you will lose those who only knew the version of you built on compromise. This is the sacred price of being real. Some friends will fade, some lovers will leave, some family members will pull away, confused, angry, or even cruel, not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped living a lie that made others feel safe. And this is where many turn back, because when the world resists your truth, it's tempting to shrink again, to dim your light, to apologize for your growth. But remember this: anyone who leaves when you become more you was never aligned with your truth. To begin with, they were connected to your patterns, your pain, your old identity, not your essence. And yes, it hurts. You'll grieve people who are still alive. You'll miss places that no longer feel like home. You'll mourn the version of yourself that endured just to belong. But you'll also breathe deeper, sleep better, stand taller, because what replaces what you lost is real friendships, real intimacy, real connection, rooted in mutual respect, not performance. And most importantly, a real relationship with yourself. Because when you stop abandoning who you are for who others need you to be, you stop betraying your peace. You reclaim your dignity. You return to your center. You become trustworthy to yourself. That's when the inner voice grows louder. Your boundaries get firmer. Your decisions become simpler, not easier, but clearer. And in that space, something profound happens. The loneliness begins to lift, because even though fewer people may be around you, you are finally fully with yourself, and that kind of presence, it's irreplaceable. But this is not the end, because once you've let go of what no longer fits, the real question appears. What now? Who are you without the noise, the chaos, the pretending? From fragmentation to wholeness, you were always the answer. So here you are, after the shedding, the silence, the sacred loss. You've burned the bridges that led you to betray yourself. You've sat with your shadow. You've chosen discomfort over denial. And now something within you feels quieter, not empty, still. And that stillness holds a secret. You were never broken, only buried. Buried beneath the layers of who you thought you had to be, buried under other people's expectations, projections, needs, buried in survival patterns that once kept you safe, but eventually kept you small. But as Carl Jung taught us, the goal of life isn't perfection, it's wholeness. And wholeness is not about fixing, it's about remembering. Remembering the parts of yourself you left behind to feel loved, the dreams you silenced to keep the peace, the voice you muted because the world wasn't ready to hear it. Now you are ready, because now you see yourself. Not just the curated version, not just the healed version, all of you, the mess, the grace, the scars, the longing, and you no longer reject any of it. This is the return to self, the homecoming, where your boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks, where your solitude isn't loneliness, it's sanctuary, where your softness isn't weakness, it's power that doesn't need to shout. You've realized that peace was never in the approval, love was never in the chasing. Your worth was never meant to be proven, only claimed. And now that you've claimed it, What once felt impossible begins to shift. The right people find you. The right opportunities open. Not because you forced them, but because you stopped forcing yourself. You became a match for the life that was always trying to reach you. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." You are no longer asleep in someone else's story. You're writing your own, page by page, truth by truth. And no, it's not always easy. There will be moments when your old self tries to re-emerge, moments when the comfort of being smaller feels tempting again. But you'll know better now. You'll feel it in your bones when you're out of alignment. You'll recognize the cost of betrayal the moment it whispers your name. And you'll choose differently. Not because you're stronger, but because you're whole. Because you know now that the love you searched for was never out there. It was never in their hands, their validation, their attention. It was always within you. Quiet. Patient, waiting for you to turn inward and finally say, "I'm listening." If this message reached you today, it's not by accident. You're not alone in this journey. There are thousands of others just like you, peeling away the layers, rediscovering their truth. So I invite you now, pause for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself, what am I ready to release? What truth have I been avoiding? And am I finally willing to choose myself completely? If this spoke to your soul, share it. Leave a comment. Let others know what part of you woke up. And above all, keep choosing yourself again and again, not out of ego, but out of devotion. Because when you do, emotional healing flows without barriers, and life becomes a reflection of your truest self.